What's up, dude?
What is up, dude? A bunch of stuff. I got so you know how last time I showed off clean coffee, right? Made a lot of progress there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
G from book club actually reached out and he was like, I finally got a chance to try it and it's looking pretty sweet. I'm pretty sure he said wow. So,
Wow.
yeah, thank you very much.
And now you're building the project management app of the future?
Yeah, the other good Lord, I'm gonna be in my house on the 25th. It's gonna be awesome.
That's soon.
It is soon. Just wired the money over. Sketchiest process in the world. They're like,
Yeah.
"Are you sure this isn't fraud?" And it's like, what kind of question is that? Wouldn't I, the defrauded, be the last person to know if it was fraud?
It's extremely common.
It is extremely common.
Yep. They intercept the wire instructions usually. What they'll do is they'll like intercept the email or whatever that's like, "Hey, all right, send it to this address." And then they'll take it and they'll change it by like a number or something. They'll do the tiniest little change and you'll send it to some fraudster and they'll just run off with your money. And there's like, the reason they're so serious about it is because there's like nothing you can do to get that money back. Like you might as well send Bitcoin to some shadow wallet, like it is gone.
I was gonna say it's like Bitcoin. Although our buddy was saying he's like, oh well, I just sent $1,000 first and had them confirm, and I'm like, that's so smart. And like I
Yeah.
can even do that without doing the phone call. I could have been like, let me do a domestic wire transfer under $10,000, send them effectively a password in dollars, have
Hmm.
them tell me that password, and then call them and be like, hey, use that thing that worked, but with a bigger number, please.
Yeah. Yeah. You
I'll
don't
do
even
that
have to
next
tell
time I
them what you're
buy a
doing.
house.
You could just send the 1,000 and be like, "Did you get it?" And they'd be like, yeah." You're like, a few figures short, and you'd be like, "Okay, cool. The rest is on the way." You know,
Yeah,
easy.
I think next time what you do is you send 0.1%,
Yeah, sure.
so that's like the right number. So that's fun. Yeah, I though do eagerly want to share and want to make the most of this time on the
Let's do it.
subject of, and let me go turn off my development environment. I
I
don't
uh,
know why I forget to turn this off before I start talking to you.
I took the time to write down my requirements slash process.
I would that's where I want to start, frankly. So here, some
Really?
some
Okay.
context, okay? Because and we got to start getting in the attitude of longs, and you can even announce when you feel like a long is about to happen. That'll help the transcriber process it. I know I'm an episode behind, but that's because I'm trying to make it a real nice long processing system. I'm also moving, but so I think the next long that's probably about to happen will be titled something like the Ultimate Knowledge Management System. No, that's a terrible name. Don't use that. Anyway, I uh, have written a LogSeq clone. I used a lot of AI for it. I used the crap out of Codex for it. 60 pull requests later, I have a working outliner and pages and bullets and a tab, and I can even link to the page. And I 2 of the weeks were spent with me forking the backend I'm using called InstantDB. I made a fork of it in GitHub, and anything I fork, I can use it with Codex. And so I was like, Codex, make this self-hostable. And it just tore through the code and was like, you need this and this and this and this and this and this, and you can change this here, and that should work. And it does. And so I have it running in my house now as the back end.
Nice. Okay.
And it's all open source anyway, and I'm trying to recontribute and I'm talking to them. I'll see if I can get it merged. But the the motivation behind this is LogSec is very local, or you can pay $8 a month for them to sync it for you. I hope that doesn't go down. And then Obsidian is not open source, but it is fantastic. You can also pay them about $8 a month, I think, for synchronizing. You can also use Git, but that's kind of sketchy. And so what I'm doing is hate coding a wide open alternative.
Okay.
And now I am to the point where I'm like, okay, let's talk task management. And I spent like 6 turns with the O3 Pro model that takes like 20 minutes to think about your question. I got it to think for like 23 minutes about my last question before it gave me the answer about knowledge management and task management, and not how do you enable people's every little custom preference. No, no, it's help, hey, Chat GPT, help me work out what I think is the correct way to do it. The way. An extremely opinionated way of going about it that takes in all of the experience. And I think you and me are probably going to be largely on the same page. I'll be curious to see where we differ. And so before I make any claims about what I think is the right way, I would like to talk about the problem space. You said the word requirements earlier. You bothered to prepare a list of requirements. I would love to start there. Later, I'll probably ask you to dive deep into the reality of how you are realizing this in Notion at your work. You touched on it a little bit last time we talked about it, but I'd like to hear like an end to end. What is the information? Where do you get it from? Who do you coordinate with? Can they submit the information? Like, but later. And so, unless you have any specific preference to the contrary, I'd like to hear your list of requirements.
Okay. So the it's kind of going to be a little bit of requirements and process mixed together. So like a little bit of the why and the what kind of blended, if you will. So the big kind of why, I actually moved this from the end to the beginning. Projecting future work, I think, is one of the most difficult things for any PM to do. There's a lot of different estimating strategies to do it. I don't really like any of the mainstream ones. And what I've come to do, I find to be reliable and accurate and useful and mostly automated. And if I got the tools just right, I could probably sauce up just the last couple bits of it. That would really be nice. So there's also a need to, so not only say like what you think you can get done in the foreseeable future, but also like what you are getting done as time passes. So you need to like update status. So I do like a weekly, or you could call it sprintly memo to call it stakeholders, call it leadership, whoever it is you want to keep in touch. Call it the information radiator, something like that. And right now I write it manually. I think it would be better if it was built off of comments on the issues, but I'll get into that. So for projecting future work, really, I think all you need is to be able to size that work. I like t-shirt sizing, and you need to be able to compare the average time to complete same size issues in the recent path. You don't want to pull an average from like the last year or 2 years necessarily, because teams change and team capabilities change. You remove an engineer, the team's going to get slower. As engineers learn, they might speed up. So it's kind of good to look at the last maybe 3 to 6 months. And that helps account for like staff changes, team growth, things like that. In order to do that, you need to know when you started and when you finished each task. It's not enough to say like, oh, this was going to take 4 days. Like 4 days of what exactly? When somebody says it's going to take 4 days, they almost never mean 4 calendar days. They usually mean something like 4 business days, which is like not even a real thing, because it's what it really referring to. If somebody says it takes 4 days, is something like 4 days of perfect uninterrupted development time, which is not really something that exists in any kind of real business. So it's not really useful to me, honestly. When somebody says it's going to take X days or even X hours, it's like, well, how do I factor in all the other noise? And a lot of people try to factor in the noise directly. They try to give themselves things like story points for meetings. I heard blew my mind, bro.
The very function of
Meetings.
story points is to account for the noise, but go on.
The story points, you shouldn't earn a story point for anything other than planned work, because the whole reason for them is to project later how long it's going to take you to finish planned work. So I use this example with the person who told me that they were they had somebody on their team giving themselves story points for meetings to, account for the story points that they weren't getting. This all comes from like, oh, well, everybody has 40 hours in a week. And so we'll try to plan you to a 40-hour capacity. And you reverse engineer from that the most fucked up process ever. And what I asked was, I was like, okay, well, let's say they had, 5 meetings that week and they gave themselves 2 story points for every meeting because every meeting was 2 hours and they did no development work. How much planned work worth of story points did you get done that week? Is it 10 or is it 0? Because by my book, it's 0, right? So anyway, not to get too far off topic, what you really need is when you started working on it and when you finished working on it. I don't need to know how often you stopped and started and stopped and started. I don't care if you started it in March and then set it down for 6 months and then picked it back up in like August or whatever. When did you start it? When did you finish it? And that now I'm able to do automatically in Notion. I was able to set up a Notion automation that as soon as you drag it to in progress, it sets a start date. And as soon as you drag it to done, it sets an end date. And so automatically I know when things are started and finished. And you're also able to set a target end date before you even get started, which is going to help you kind of build out a bit of like an expectation roadmap for the near future. Like, okay, here are the kind of times that I'm targeting to finish these things. And so if you drag something to in progress and you already have a target date set, let's say my target date is, end of June, right? And I drag it into in progress today. Today is June 17th. It's going to show on my timeline June 17th to June 30th. And it's going to say what engineer is working on it. And so I'm automatically building out a Gantt chart. And I'm like, oh, well, I know what engineers are doing what or plan to do what during a certain time period. And then when I actually finish the work, let's say I finish it July 15th, it's going to change that June 30th start date to a July 17th actual finish date, right? And then what I have is I started on it on June 17th and I ended July 15th or whatever I just said, which is nice. Then I have the reality of it. And if at the beginning I said, oh, this is a medium, then I know that medium took a month to finish. And if that, is a pattern over the next few months with all of my mediums, then I know mediums are probably going to take a month. So then the next time I look at something and say, this is a medium, good chance it's going to take a month, and I'm able to start letting people know and projecting things out and figuring out, engineer allocation and stuff like that. Is it perfect? No, but it's pretty close. It's pretty freaking close. So that's start dates and end dates. And again, really nice if it automatically sets the dates based on statuses.
I think getting that data together to model it is interesting. I wonder too if you could track the original estimation and the actual, and maybe auto detect certain like component implications. Like, listen, mediums for tool B, okay, look like this. Mediums for tool C, we tend to do this, and it being 6 months is interesting. Yeah, the recency, right? Because you're going to be getting efficiencies, and it's you have this like moving average almost is a term that comes to mind. Okay, so this is perfect because I hadn't necessarily even considered it as a PM tool, but I think there's some interesting opportunity to have a organizational throughput approach to this from the beginning. Like this actually, like maybe you could actually sell this as like a B2B tool at that point. That's getting ahead of us though. What else you got? That was a fantastic example. The projection and the way you're currently coping was very interesting.
So then what I need is a parent-child relationship, and that needs to be, I guess, a few levels deep, I can get by with like 2 levels deep where it's like you have kind of a parent and a child and that's it. Kind of, I think, ideal at least to have a parent, child, grandchild situation. And the reason I like that is that I like the parents to be the thing that, that's like the epic. That's what I'm planning with the stakeholders. And I'm kind of fleshing out like all the pieces. And some pieces are going to be in and some pieces are going to remain unfinished at the end. But I use that because I like to, just like I'm able to do in Jira and I'm able to hack in Notion, I like to organize all of the pieces, like all of the stories or bugs or tasks. I like to keep them in their own lane based on whatever big initiative they're a part of. So that parent initiative is my top level. And it has a lane, and in that lane is everything that I'm doing for that. And then the next lane down is everything I'm doing for that. In Notion, it's grouping on actually it's subgrouping on a Kanban board. So grouping is what the columns are, and then subgrouping is like lanes in those columns, top to bottom. So my subgrouping I do by parent in that case. And then the children are just the things that you're actually doing, which are going to be like your features, your bugs, and your tasks and stuff. And then I do think it's nice to have kind of a grandchild element, because you may have a feature that the engineer then wants to go and break up into engineering tasks. And it's nice to have those kind of move across the board together and have basically on the grandchild say like, who is its parent? Who's the child that it's a part of. So this nesting, I think, is really, really helpful.
The last time we talked about this, I think I was trying to pitch something that I would name granular, given arbitrary decomposition. But now I'm wondering if we could, and you kind of did already, analyze what useful levels look like, because I think there might be labels to these levels, even if levels might contain the same level. Like at the very top, it's got to be Y, or I guess the what, which might be asserted based on a Y, and then you got the how, you got the what and the how, right? And there can be an arbitrary number of levels, I think, in each of them, but they are indeed stacked. And so what you're demanding is the scope, and how you deliver that scope is like the engineering concern. And being able to be like, instead of being like, we nailed it, this is the correct amount of scope, you can be like, oh my God, no, this wound up being so big, I need to, you know, instead of trying to come up with new names like epic and sub epic and theme, you can just be like, this is in the Y bucket, here's the Y tree, and then the Y tree has how roots.
That's clever. I don't know. I would say the epic and stuff like those aren't new. Those are actually pretty classic. I think that you might be trying to come up with something new. For me, I think I
I
actually I actually am really happy with epic, and then under epic you have story, task, and bug. So story is like some feature that somebody's going to get. Task is something that dev wants to do because it's going to make the system maybe better for some dev reason. Bug is something that's broken that should be fixed. And in a single epic, you could have any number of those things. And then subtask can live underneath any of those three. And it's just, breaking down the how.
I do think you can make it fairly arbitrary, such that only things without children can be furthered. What are the things we can move forward? Well, let's go look at the stuff that doesn't have children. There, this one, move this forward. Oh, can't do that. Got to do this. Great, do that, child. And I don't think it's incompatible. And I'm not trying to come up with new names. I'm just trying to step all the way back to a first principle for accommodating the actual way work gets done. But I think if Epic, and I think as well, bug task story was interesting because, I really want to imbue some of the like pattern idea that we've been talking about forever, that we've been reading about forever.
Yeah.
We didn't invent this, but things that are like planned work, unplanned work, just setting you up to where the words you wind up having to use to describe what you're doing sets you up for the flow that we understand to be ideal.
Right.
Planned work, unplanned work. Calling it planned work eliminates meetings from being something you can label.
I think as far as organizing on a Kanban board, you're right about having an arbitrary number of levels. The way that I would portray it is that anything that has no parent that also is a parent. Fuck, nope, doesn't work. See, so right now, at least, I have to have some way to distinguish what it is that I want my lanes to be. So be it either call it everything that's an epic ends up being a lane, or everything that is a top level parent ends up being a lane. One way or the other. You have to have some way to say, like, this is a lane. This is not a card that's going on the board necessarily.
Lane.
Yeah.
Give me an example of a lane.
Um,
Referring to
so
swim lanes where you have categories of flow that have an end. So I mean, it is some scope you're realizing, but you're realizing it over the course of some throughput.
Exactly. So, like, if we're overhauling our corporate gifting system, I have an epic for that, which is essentially a lane. Like, I have a card for it as well. That card lives at an epic level board for me. So I have this sort of epic level board that I use to talk about like what big initiatives we're going to be looking at
Strategy.
when, right? But then on our actual practical board, our Kanban board where the team is working and practicing, I don't show those epic cards. They actually show up as a lane on that board. And so all of their children show up on that board. The children don't show up on the strategy board, they show up on the work
Tactical.
board. Tactical. So just something to keep in mind. When the thing is, like, I've played around with this so much, I don't really know what I like. And I think some of it, just in this very specific context, and some of it is like because it's cope. It's like, I'm trying to work around what features are available to me. So it'd be fun to play with it a little bit, specifically, and show you kind of what I've done in areas that I have problems. But what I do know that I need is the ability, if I have a given card on the board and it has a parent, I want to know right there on the board what its parent is. So be it either the lane that it's in is labeled because that's what its parent is, or if it's a subtask of another card on the board, I want it to be clear that it's nested underneath it, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't necessarily want everything to be so jumbled like it is on Notion. I really like the way that Jira handles subtasks because it kind of nests them as a child underneath the parent task. I think that that's really well handled. I'd like to see that.
I do think a lot of the challenge is going to be the user experience. The actual interface is I think the primary challenge, because what I've got so far is I have effectively a very arbitrary block graph where pages are a collection of blocks. Blocks can link to pages, blocks can link to blocks, and blocks have like, I think it's like 7 fields of start date, due date, type, recurring date if they are to occur at a given cadence, like a chore, take out the trash. There's a couple more, but with those combinations, you could, for example, have a page with the title of a project, and you could take a block and connect it to that project. And you could have, descriptions, great, but then you could have another block have an arbitrary child association with any other block. So like the data structure, I think, can accommodate everything you've described. I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be displaying it in a coherent way. And one of the things that I think you can win over on Notion is that too wide open for what I want to do here. Like, I just want it to be the fewest possible clicks in the way that I think it needs to work. It's a little clunky. I've got my own Notion. The databasing thing has the data structure I need, but it's too clunky. You can't have the interface you want because it's got to accommodate every possible display.
Yeah. No,
And
I'm
so with
with
this,
you.
the idea would be to have many, many, many views of the same data, and for the data to have a lot of interconnection and a lot of reversal and filterability, so I can show you all of your to-dos, all of your parentless strategy items. Maybe there's a default, type where it is in the what or how bucket, so that your, one-off how that you don't want to make an epic just so it fits in Jira is still treated in this way where I can consume it the way I want to. But go on.
Yeah. What I want is really just a combination of Jira and Notion features, like you said, with a lot of them cut out. It's not like I wouldn't be happy if you just took every feature in Jira and made it available in Notion. I want like maybe 10% of the Notion features and like 5% of the Jira features, and I'm there.
That's the sweet spot. And even things like I was even questioning to do, doing, done. What does doing even mean? What does that even mean? And what does it mean to the end of the signal you even intend to send? And so working backwards from the outcomes you want was a big part of this. I've been a big fan of backlog, next, planned, scheduled, done, where Backlog is everything that you could ever hope to want. It's your pile of cope where you promise you wrote it down. Your next is your stuff you're probably going to do. Planned is stuff you have written out your plan for executing it. Scheduled is the plan will occur at this time, and then you're done.
Yeah. I'll tell you what mine are. So for statuses, because you're talking about how things get from ideas to done.
Right. Right.
So for statuses, I have inbox, which is for new ideas and deferred ideas, right? So even if I'm like, yeah, we're probably not going to do this, I just stick it back in the inbox. So the inbox is a pile, very, very large pile. I rarely ever look at it, only if somebody brings something up. What I will do is I will first go search the inbox to see if it's already in there. And if it is, I'll pull it out of the inbox. And if it's not, then I'll create a new item.
Icebox, remember that?
And then I have backlog, which is my list of things I definitely want to do. And it's lazily ranked. So I kind of drag some things a little higher, drag some things a little lower. And it's mostly made up of like top level parent type items. There's not a ton of like real granularity in the backlog. Might be a little bit. If somebody's like, I want this thing, it's got da da da. But sometimes it'll be like, I'll just make a ticket for the thing they brought up and I'll just list in bullet points on that parent what kind of like the child issues are. And I'll worry about breaking it out into smaller stuff later if it becomes a higher priority or makes it to next, which I have next and discovery. I think you could get away with one or both. Really, so next is like kind of the top of backlog. It's more stack ranked, and discovery is like the PM has started gathering requirements. It's kind of like late phase, early phase next, and late phase next. Like this is up. I just want you to know what I'm thinking about doing next. Discovery is like, okay, the PM is actually digging in and breaking it down into children and like, okay, what are the actual things that we want to get out of this? What are the features that we're looking to have at the end of this thing? And what are like the musts and what are the nice to haves? Then it goes into scoping. So scoping, the whole point of scoping is like, okay, an engineer's time is being used on this now, and we haven't yet begun work. What we're doing is probably a spike or two, and we're trying to figure out exactly when we think we can target a completion on this. So I may already have like an ideal target date, but by the time it comes out of scoping, I'm going to update the target date to be what we think it'll actually be based on the size of the issue. And after scoping, it goes to in progress. And in progress, I have basically three statuses. One is on track. That's the default status. As soon as something has a target date set, it goes into on track, and we are on track for that target date. Now, at any given time, which we have a weekly touch point on this, if any given week we get together and we get to that issue as we're walking the board, this is not just with my team, this is org wide. So everybody in the org is using a board that is looking like this. And so we get down to an issue and it's like, yeah, I don't know. We're a little behind on that. I don't know if that target date 3 weeks out is going to be good anymore. So what we do is we leave a comment on the card saying what we're going to do about the newly discovered fact that we're probably not going to get this done on time. There's speculation that we're not going to get this done on time. We switch the status from on track to concerns. It's like a yellow light. And we update the target date to what we think it's going to be. And what you can see then in our report in the end is this updated from green to yellow. Here's why. Maybe somebody was busy, maybe some other thing came up. And here's what the new target date is. So it was this and now it's this. So you see green to yellow, this date to that date. Here's why it happened. Then the next week, when you come back around, the question is, are we on track for that new target date still? And if the answer is yes, it flips back to green. And so on the next week's status report, you see yellow to green, still on track for that new target date. And if you were to look at the history for that issue, you'd see all of the status tracking. So originally this was our plan, then this was our plan, then this was our plan. And so there's accountability throughout. There's no like, well, why did this take 6 months? It's like, go look at the issue. You'll see exactly what happened to our plan over the last 6 months.
So I love this, and something that comes to mind I'd like your perspective on. In my experience, stakeholders and leadership do not seem to engage the project management tool often. That's right. right?
Correct.
I wonder if, and this is another UX level question, right? I wonder if more work, in fact, most work to be done is really about getting that information radiator up.
Yeah,
Because what I'm hearing from
that's what it's
you
all about.
well, so what I'm hearing from you, and I want to hear your commentary on it being stakeholder oriented and the information radiator being the very purpose of this, not the very purpose, but a primary purpose. I'm hearing you're taking these steps, flipping it to yellow, waiting until the second check to flip it back to green was really interesting. You don't flip it to green when you change the date. You flip it to green when that date change looks to be on track
Sticking.
after some time
Yeah.
has sticking. Both of those operations have nothing to do with how the engineers get their work done. It's about your communication with your stakeholders. Talk to me about stakeholder communication and the actual means by which the communication occurs. And if you ever see in a future someone a level above you, or not even above you, but a stakeholder referring to a tool to just see their dashboard, is it just never going to happen? Is it a fool's errand?
It'll never happen. And I'll tell you exactly. I love that you asked these questions because this is right where I was going.
Maybe an email.
The last of my in progress statuses is critical. And critical can be used for either this is devastatingly late, and so it's red. So once something is critical, it never flips back to green. Once it's critical until it's done, right? This is a red issue. Or it could just be something could get flipped to critical the day after it goes to on track. And that is just, this is critical. Don't forget about it. We're going to talk about the criticals, and we're going to make sure that they're highlighted at the top of our information radiator because it's
Love
a
that.
critical item. Okay. So something that is happening right now, what we do is, and I'm going to be specific about the tools because I think it'll help you visualize. So in Notion, on each individual card, you have a comments functionality, right? And what I was saying is, like, every single Monday, every week, you leave a comment on every card. It's just the latest status. What's going on with this? And what it includes is the why, the what, the when, the who. Now, the earlier comments are always going to have the who and the why. The later comments can be the what and the when, because the what can shift. It can be like, well, we were going to do this. Now we've narrowed the scope to this. And the when can shift because it can be like, we're going to have it done Friday. Now we're going to have it done next Wednesday, right? So the earlier comments are like, we're doing this for this reason, and it's going to benefit us, for in all of these ways, these people specifically, and we plan to have it done at this time. This is exactly the scope that we're trying to get done. That's kind of what the comment looks like early on. And then later on, the comment is just like, yep, we're still on track for, this Wednesday. And I let so-and-so know that it's coming. It's just an update on the issue. Now, unfortunately, right now, there's two things I can't do with those comments that I would love to do with those comments. One thing I would love to do is display them at a table level, because that would allow me to basically create a view just for the stakeholders. One thing that you said I don't think is entirely accurate. You said, like, the stakeholders don't want to dig around in the tool. I think it's true they don't want to dig around in the tool. I don't think that we can't expect them to log into the tool, but we have to give them the plainest view. They need to get in and have to do nothing. You log in, you bookmark it. I want this to be a bookmark. You click on it. There's your report right there
It
in
should
front
be
of
at slash.
you.
It
Yes.
shouldn't even be a
Yes.
bookmark. It should be go to the website we're using and thank you for logging in.
Right. You don't have to do anything. It's just your information radiator. So one way I could accomplish that is if I could just display my comments, my most recent comment, as if it were a property. I can't do that. I've tried to use like custom properties to pull the most recent comment, and I can't do it. But if you think about it in Notion, in the table, you can display any property you want to. What I can't display is the most recent comment. Imagine if you had all of the in progress items in the most recent comment. Given the process that I've described to you, you would know what is the latest on everything that's currently in progress. And that is your information radiator. That's your report. Since we don't have that, I know you might have a question, but since we don't have that, what we do is manually, every PM goes, after we do this process and commented everything out, we go and basically copy our comments and write the report manually. So what we use for that is actually a Slack canvas. And in a Slack canvas, we just have a section for every initiative and bullet points that are essentially the comments for every one of the tasks within that larger initiative, right? And because I've got this disjointedness to it, what ends up happening is in our daily process and our daily routine, those comments end up being really light, like really, really like kind of half-assed, kind of, like not great grammar, just kind of talked to blah, blah. Whereas the comments in the memo are actually more thought out. I'd love to just write the thought out comment right on the card and have it make its way to the information radiator. Now, the information radiator could, like I said, if I could show a comment on a table level, I would build my own radiator in the form of a view, in the form of a database view, but it would be a locked database view. It would be the dumbest thing ever. Nobody would have to ever touch anything. You just go to it and you would see this week. It would always be filtered by this week's items.
Things
So
that you're
that's the dream.
subscribed to as well, like
Right.
your one
Sure.
stakeholder sees the things they care about, maybe because you do tag
Absolutely.
stakeholders in
Yeah.
some of the context as well.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, we do tag stakeholders. There are a lot of things that I'm leaving out for properties that I think are almost just givens because they're mostly like text properties and things like that would be easy to figure out later. But there are things like stakeholder, system, theme, different stuff that allows you to classify the issues and look at your backlog multidimensionally. But let me just wrap up the communication bit here before we get into some of that stuff, because I'm almost there. When something, so I've told you as something is in progress, kind of how we're communicating week to week and how we're pushing out like a weekly memo that is basically a culmination of these comments going on each issue. And so it should, if we were able to pipe our status changes and our comments into an information radiator, I'd be in heaven. Okay. But I don't have that now. So we do that last part manually. Once we're done with development, it goes into a review stage, right? In like Jira, you think of like a review testing stage. Now you can have like code review and testing as two separate columns. You could just have review and testing where it's like we're reviewing it, then we're testing it, then it goes to production. Once something's in production, it's moved to done. Okay. And when it's done, it stays on my board, especially my communication board, my high level board, because what that means is it's completed. We're probably announcing it to the company and putting it into this week's report. So it stays on the board. Okay. And I also see right there on the board the start date and the finish date, because those are automatically set as soon as I move something to done. So when I come back the next week and I see everything in the done column, a lot of folks, because again, this is a multi-team process, a lot of folks, they move their stuff to communicated after it's gone out in the memo. This is done. I've communicated.
Is an interesting
Communicated is
status.
the
I'll
final
hold on to
status.
that. I'll hold
It's
on to
the
that
final
because
status.
that's another topic.
Now, if I see something was moved to done a week ago, I just move it to communicated because I know it went out in last week's status report if it was moved to done. So I like that I have the dates there to see. But once it's moved to communicated, that's when it disappears from my Kanban board because it is water under the bridge at that point. We have told the company about it. We've communicated to all stakeholders. We've trained anyone that has to be trained. It only stays there in the done column for as long as development work is completed. The work is in production, but we're still telling people about it. Okay. And that again is where I would love there to be some connection between my tactical board and my strategic or communications kind of process, right? Well, really, you have strategic, which is like before anything starts, and then you have tactical, which is while you're working on it, and then you have communication, which is your information radiator and things being done. And that's it. Communicated is the last status. Like I said, it's water under the bridge. And then the last thing is just that weekly or sprintly kind of memo that's going out, which again should just be a culmination of status and date changes and the comment explaining why that status and date may have changed. Or stayed the same even, right? Because the comment comes in every week, no matter what. You're going to touch every issue and you're going to say where we're at on it. How's it going as a PM? And you work with the team to get that answer. But that's it. That's like the whole process. And the things that are missing right now for me really are a smoother, not hacked way of tracking kind of parents and children on the board, having just a nice clean way to say like, this is an epic. So it's not going to appear on my task, bug, and storyboard. It's going to appear on the epic strategic board.
Yeah, it's a what, not a how.
Yeah. It's not necessarily that clear. And I can do it, but the problem is like when you're grouping by parents in Jira, in Notion, the problem, and this is actually something I skipped over, and this is the real missing feature that Jira has that Notion doesn't, is I can't rank the parents. So unfortunately, I can do it manually in a really weird way, and it doesn't respect that ranking because Notion tends to choke on a multi-level parent-child relationship. So what I do is I just sort alphabetically, which kind of sucks because what you really want is like the most important epic and all those issues to be at the top, you know? So I'm able to do that in Jira. I'm not able to do that in Notion. I'd love to be able to do that in Notion. So basically, like what I want to be able to do is if it's an epic, okay, I can stack rank it just like I can in Jira. I can stack rank all the epics, right? And then that stack rank will be reflected on the task board, on the tactical board. So whatever epic is at the top is going to be at the top on my tactical board. That is a feature I would love to have. The other missing feature, because I think the way that I handle start and end dates with automation isn't really a hack. It's actually directly how you would do it. There's no hackiness to it. It's just a little bit artisanal, but it works really well. And it's custom, so I can really think about like contingencies. Like, what if I already set a target date and like you can handle it? Or what if there's no target date set? How do I handle it? But what I'm also missing is the fact that our comments and our status changes and stuff like that aren't automatically making their way to some real simple, easy to read information radiator. Now, what I could do is add a field as a property that is like most recent comment, and then I could like copy it and put it there. But it's just like, ask people to, the more steps I add to the process, the less people get it right. And then somebody new comes in, which has happened a few times. And God, dude, you learn everything about how janky your process is when somebody new comes in and you have to tell them about all the nuances and all the little things and all the like, oh, well, just FYI, it works a little funky. So you have to do that. What I did is I made it real easy to create child and parent issues because I used like custom Notion buttons. So when you click create a child issue, it pops up and like, it's real simple. It's going to show up in the right place. You click create a parent initiative. It's going to show up in the right place and have the right things checked so that it doesn't show up on the right board, or on the wrong board. Anyway.
Interesting.
I digress. Yeah. I'm doing a lot of like hacky workaround stuff in Notion to get my process as close to what I want as possible, but it's still lacking for sure.
I'm definitely thinking it's interesting. You could make maybe custom forms, I guess would be the way to refer to that, without turning it into the way the data is structured. You could make this kind of a form, we'll put it into the data structure this way and it becomes available. I think the way I'm presenting the application now, and I mean, it's very early days, is a little close to the metal where you're kind of constructing the data as it is. But if you were able to take a step back, you'd be able to it's what's the reference? There was a criticism of design where they were like, they should not have called it the gas pedal. They should have called it the accelerator, right? Because its function is to accelerate. It's not just the composite name of the thing that it is. You can refer to its function. It's an accelerator. It accelerates. By whatever means, it doesn't matter. It's the accelerator.
Yeah. There's something I want to add. So I know you kind of came into this as like, oh, like task management. You're probably thinking about personal tasks, because you seemed a little surprised when I went whole hog into like project management. But I think this is valid in both cases. I know one of the problems I've had that I've shared with you is like, I don't have a great way of like sharing tasks with my wife, which would be nice because I want her to have an easy way to tell me what chores she wants me to knock out that week, right? Just drop them on my board and I will just knock them out. And so we try to do it with like Notion, but to your point, Notion is like so feature rich that it's like, oh God, what do I fucking click again? Every like 3 weeks when she wants to drop a few chores on my plate, it's like, how do I do this again? And I'm like, man, I thought I had it set up as like a no brainer, but still takes a little bit of brain because it's Notion. And, like what I did is I took like every chore I could possibly be asked to do. There's only like 10 of them, these things like clean the bathroom, vacuum, whatever. And I made them all templates, on a Notion database. And so all she has to do is click like the drop down arrow for new and pick which chore she wants done and click it. And it'll automatically assign it to me, put it to priority for this week, and I'll just see it on my board and I'll grab it when I can and it'll go to in progress. But I want it to be much simpler for her to do, for her to just drop something, say whatever she wants done on the board. And, I want there to be a clear information radiator. Like I'd love for it to send out, a notice at the end. And honestly, you talked about information radiator, like, oh, go to this link. I mean, it might be nice just to have like a weekly email, just send out like a, hey, look, here is the report for the week. And it just captures, it takes a snapshot of the state of things. It says, here are things right now. Here's everything that was completed. Here's everything that's new.
You know what stakeholders love? Email.
Yeah, no shit.
Freaking love email. And you know what they love so much, even more than email? PowerPoint. Imagine emailing them a slide. They would love that.
Yeah, no
so one thing I am interested in is, because of the interface that this system is, it's primarily an outliner. An outliner just being a series of blocks that can be nested in pages. That is the root of the data structure, and then the blocks can have metadata, like, is it a task, is it a resource, is it a whatever, and all of these things can have user experience implications. But at root, you have a graph owned by a user. You have pages within that graph and blocks within those pages. You can have multiple graphs. And I have been thinking through the ACL, because you don't want it to be wide open, of course. What you could do is make it a little open, where certain associations permit the associated, if there's Joe and Mike, and Joe's graph 1 and Mike's graph 1, and then Joe's page 1, and then Joe's page 1 block 1, I could grant any level of that scope to you to manage.
I love that. So one problem that I've had as well, so I'll have like my personal notes, right? And so I have this like public database that has all of our project stuff in it. And then I have Michael's personal notes, where like I'll meet with a stakeholder and I'll just take a whole bunch of notes, or I'll have the AI do it for me or whatever, right? And what I want to be able to do is take a block of my notes and make that block a public block that is shown on the public task, right? That way, if I happen to be reflecting on my notes and I'm like, when I refine my notes a little bit, it refines it on the project as well. Or if I refine it on the project, it refines it in my notes as well.
Yes.
But right now in Notion, if I take a block from a private page and I share it on a public page, it's a invisible block. It just says like, you can't see this.
Well,
if it says anything at all.
I would imagine, and this might even solve your problem in the Notion context, what I would expect to do is, rather than sharing my private notes, I would, because I have write access to this other graph, I would do like a move and backlink operation, where this now lives in the public context and I link it back here.
And then
if I modify it here,
public block back in your private area. Yeah.
Which might even solve in your case, where it wouldn't show up blank because, well, you have access to it. So that might even solve it in Notion.
So you copy the block, paste it without syncing, and then sync it back to your private place. It's a little bit extra steps, but yeah, it could work for sure.
Well, it's a little bit of an extra step in Notion. So what I'm thinking is, because I have this outliner system, I'm thinking that you can treat it like a journal, and every line, you can kind of treat it like a command almost, where you say, let's say your wife wants this thing done, which is just be a recurring calendar event, and you know it.
Yeah, but they change. Oh, bro, we've had, okay, just to have this fight with you
real
fast.
You have 30 seconds.
They change is the problem, because if it were clear division of responsibilities where I do the same chores, I would just set up recurring events. But sometimes we like to do different things than we did last time, and so we trade. So anyway, carry on.
Don't worry, my wife doesn't listen to our podcast either. So what even the hell was I saying? Because this thing is like, really, it's a journal. And you could write in things like, it'd be great if @Mike could pound and then sand, right? And then right, and you choose maybe from pound/chore/whatever, enter, and then it just goes up because the context implies that it's some thing, and you can have these existing systems, and it can have a whole page describing the thing. And I also was thinking that if we do text-driven command approach, this fits in nicely to LLMs, where an LLM can watch every bullet coming in, and it can also submit new bullets, and it can take advantage of this tool orientation where instead of having to like navigate the UI or have like a complex API scheme, you just consume and publish blocks with a couple metadata fields, and the links together between blocks and blocks and blocks and pages and the tree that it creates is what enables the expressiveness. I think I sent you, I was like, hey ChatGPT, give me 50, no, give me 20 examples of filters. And it was like, oh, here's your global next, here's your daily notes, here's your things that aren't linked, here's your this, here's your that, here's your this, here's your that. And you could have real-time collaboration on like a sub note or some sub scope, or you have, you know, you're doing in your notes, you create a page, you hear that page becomes like the root of some other system. You could put multiple pages under another. Like it just turns into this tree where when you make one item available, the rest of it becomes available.
Yeah, I like that. I was going to say, if I share, say, like a block to another page, I would like to be prompted with, like, do you want to update this block's permissions to that of the page? Like, do you want this block to inherit this page's permissions or keep its previous page's permissions? So I would like that. And then, so
Yeah.
obviously, if you go to the originating page, you still see nothing because you don't have access to see that page, including any public blocks that might exist on it. But if you go to the public page, you can see even the blocks that came from a private page, as long as it was said, yes, please inherit the permissions from this page.
That's because the
Otherwise, it
block
would show as a
exists.
private block.
The block exists on its own and just
Right.
by default had permission here, and you're just adding permissions
Exactly.
to it. And you can make them read. You can do read, create, update, and delete permissions per block.
Right.
And so you
Whereas
could make a
what
read-only
Notion
block.
does is like, this block belongs to this page, and I can share a view of this block over here, a synced view of it, but it's got whatever permissions it is inheriting from its parent page. So like you said, I'd have to do what you suggested by moving it to the public page first. Very clever, by the way. I don't know how the hell that didn't
Well,
cross.
I mean, it sounds clever. I'm sure, attempting even part of it will reveal how complex it is, or like, oh,
I wouldn't ask
I
anybody
didn't.
else to do it. I do all sorts of shit that is like a janky workaround that I would never ask somebody else to try to do.
Well, the thing is, all you need, there's two aspects to this. One, there's can the data structure express the relationships that you're attempting? That's one question. And then two, can you make an interface that is intuitive to that end, even if the background expressiveness of the data is complicated and not even comprehensible by your end user? That doesn't matter. What matters is, you make a Kanban interface. And I don't ask you, please construct a Kanban interface. I ask you, what filter would you like in this Kanban interface? And I give you a way to, select different filters, and then bam, there's your Kanban. And if you're a nerd about it, we can talk about why this is clever. But I'm trying to think of a journal first bullet system where if you add a couple properties to the block and a couple associations to the page, all of these other views show up for free. Calendar, Kanban, a graph view where you can just discover what people are working on, a multiple project manager, multi-graph collaboration, I think might even be the differentiator, right? Where I can share arbitrary things to you, or I can grant copy or whatever, and we can have our own slice of what matters to us. And if you can really nail the information radiator, you can really start to sell maybe stakeholders on it, where it's like, if I, pay for information-radiator.b2bsaas.com, I just, I never have any questions, noquestions.com, don't go there. But, you wouldn't have any questions, preempting the questions of the stakeholder where they're just like, their whole job now is to just to be picky.
Yeah.
They don't
Well,
have to like
or
hound
just do the
you
job
because the
that they're
tool,
supposed to do, right?
well,
Because like the stakeholders all have like their own job outside of asking me for stuff to make their job easier. So they can spend more time focusing on that and less time, handling me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. So that was fun, and I mean, we'll see how much of this I'm able to even do. I'm going to start small, of course, but hey, if it gets legs, especially after I move into my house, I am looking to build a SaaS. I'm probably going to try to make money on clean coffee at some point, although I might reconstruct it on top of Instant DB, just because I prefer it over Supabase at this point. That detail doesn't matter to the end user. And so at some point, I would like to sell software. I think that would be fun.
I think I think it would be a blast to build a project management tool. I remember we tried to do that a really long time ago, and it's funny
But
thinking
HQ,
back on how God. I remember thinking back
insane.
like how little I knew
Absolutely.
about managing a project at the time. I think we could do it much better now. So that could be cool.
Yeah. And we have AI now where it can not only build it for us, but can enable the
Yeah,
tool where it's not
right,
bolted onto a legacy approach. It could be a first principles enablement.
right. And
You
what's
do
awesome is like
all sorts.
even if it would be difficult to get adoption like at work right away, I feel like I have a ton of utility for this in my personal life. I'm already using Notion for my personal life. And like you said, man, it's just really overkill in so many ways. I wish it wasn't. I wish I didn't have to use such a broad tool to do such a narrow job. But there's no other tool out there that I can get close to what I need with. It's like what I really need is like this really tiny tackle box, right? But I need it like a to get the things that I want in that tackle box, I need a fucking trunk, full of junk that I don't even care about just to get the few items that I really want in that tackle box because nobody makes a tackle box that has the things I need in it.
Tacklebox is a good name for a project management tool for what it's worth.
I like Tacklebox. That is pretty cool.
That's
It's
pretty
got
cool. I'm
it's
gonna look up some
multi entendre kind of situation.
Joe at Tacklebox. Yeah, yeah. See, Tacklebox. That would be a good one.
Is dot box a TLD perchance?
There's no way tackle.box isn't taken because I'm taking it right now.
I can see who buys a Tacklebox domain first. Tacklebox2,
And
tacklebox.net,
I like how you
Tacklebox.
can actually understand the words too, because I'm looking for a better domain. I'm jealous of wildlifebro.com. That's such a pronounceable domain.
That is a good one. That one has helped. Actually, a guy found me for the first time. Well, confirmed. He actually added me on social media after I just told him to find me at wildlifebro.com. So I was like, fuck yeah.
Tacklebox.work, $7.
Tacklebox dot Tacklebox is
Tacklebox.work.
yeah,
Confirm.
interesting. Dot
I'm
work.
buying this domain. You don't think a .work domain is good?
I don't know. I don't know. I've never used a dot work domain.
If I said I was
Huh.
Joe at tacklebox.work, would you be like, how do you spell that?
Well, the thing is, like, are you going to only use it for work? Like if you want it to also be people's like just task thing.
So hold on. Hold on. Let's have this conversation. Just as the Tacklebox product, okay, can be viewed in multiple contexts, so too could the application be viewed in multiple contexts. You could sell the same application as tacklebox.work with a very lame gray kind of view. You could sell it as sparklebox.fun, okay, where it's your personal one and it's the same app. Okay, so you don't even need to pick a domain. You don't need to be like, oh, this is, this or that. It's like however you happen upon what this tool does, okay, you're my customer.
Right. Well,
I don't know if you'd want to
tackle.box is
split it
for
like
interesting.
that, but Tacklebox is a good name. But yeah, so that would be interesting. You could do things like have integration with external tasking systems too. Like imagine if your Google Tasks just showed up in this thing. Like if you could just
KL.box is available for 120 bucks.
that's a good name. That's a four letter
Tackle.box. Yeah.
Tackle.box. That's a
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway,
I'm
that's
at
fun. I could do
$120.
domain searching for
I'm gonna wait until I want it twice.
right.
But I'll let you know. I tell you what would be the very first amount of scope that would get you excited to see it going in the right direction. I'm about to release this thing public, not do a big announcement, but make it available where people can start using at least the LogSeq outliner functionality.
Yeah, well, like I said, being able to have two views. So one is where I have epics that I can stack rank, and the other is where I see the children of those epics listed out in swim lanes by parent, and then the ability to have a information radiator, like a report that shows any recent change to status, date, comment for each one.
Yeah, information radiator would be really important. So read that to me again.
Okay, so I want to have, so I kind of have like this, oh, come on, baby. All right, this like now, next, later kind of setup for the parent initiatives. And I want to be able to stack rank them. Okay. Like drag this card up and down or whatever. And based on the stack rank, I want them to show up on my Kanban board in swim lanes. So like this parent is this lane, this parent is this lane, and so on down the Kanban board with all the children. And then I want to have a information radiator that is a report that just shows any changes to the status, the date, and any comment on it, and so on for every single one of these cards. And these as well should be grouped in order based on the stack ranking of the initiative. So we say something like, for the summer sale, we're going to do a whole summer sale epic that's got a whole suite of features that we're going to use for summer sale. It's going to have little lightning deal like features. It's going to have like new tags and flags on stuff. So summer sale, okay? And then summer sale has all these little features that we're doing in order from most important to least important as we're working across the board, right? We're going to do those. And then here, you're going to see summer sale and all the items under the summer sale initiative and what the latest is on all of those. And then the next thing that we're going to do, like I mentioned, I don't know, something like corporate gifting. And the next thing that we're going to do, which is like that is the kind of like general setup that I'm looking to get going.
I think that is valuable direction because that is, I'm already thinking through how to do it. That is readily doable. And I think it helps. This is why I wanted to talk about it before I went off and did it, because I wanted to take a step back, and really talk about what it is that we're serving here. And like you just presented a strategy first ranking system that propagates down to the rest of it because it's more coherent that way. Other experiences I've had with systems, maybe I'm using them wrong, whatever, reach out to me, Notion, if you're listening. It just is they feel like they're built for the specific context rather than built for the broader context and just to that specific context, if that makes sense. Right? What you're making a holistic appeal to information radiation that is actually going to be consumed in a way that makes sense because it's going to be top to bottom. That sounds doable. You know what already is ordered? My outline bullets. You can change their order and their indentation. That's half the work, frankly.
There's one more view I think that might even kind of live at the bottom of the information radiator, and what that is the roadmap view. The roadmap view is essentially going to look like a Gantt chart because that's what they fucking want. What they want is a Gantt chart. What you need is a way to make a Gantt chart that isn't a lie. And so we can talk more about the, Gantt chart timeline situation. And I owe you probably directly, I'll give you like a tour of, kind of like a project setup and kind of what these views look like in their current state and stuff. And we'll whip out our tools and show each other and talk about it. It'll be fun.
Yeah, I think that'll be fun. I got what I wanted out of this call. I mean, we've had this discussion before about like, oh, like the call earlier again about, I think we called it granular. And then there's plenty of tools that were doing that anyway, but I'm not hearing a lot of tools that are really just looking for that special tackle box. And if you're on board with the way we work, That's what it is. And if you wanted to do something else, go by Jira.
Yeah, that is exactly kind of the sentiment that you need, which, by the way, I would never get my wife into Jira. It would never happen.
No.
Well, granule.ar is taken as well, of course. Can't have anything nice anymore. Or somebody's squatting on it. I think there's even
Get granular, probably. You could start throwing verbs.
Yeah, but I don't want, I've seen, fuck. It's literally being squatted on, and they want to sell it for $25,000.
Yeah, but it's not expensive.
Takl.box. It's a little harder to say, or to say to somebody like, oh, go to tackle.box, but it's takl.box. I hate that about certain domains,
I don't want to tell people how to spell it.
No, the ideal domain, you can just say it and they can find it, and you
agro.box.
Agro.box is great. You don't have to add any extra like the or totally or real, like none of that shit, or get. I don't even like that. What if you just repurpose agrobox? Fuck, you already got it.
I literally was thinking I might just point agrobox at it.
That's pretty cool. You could probably.
What is it? Agro.box.
Yeah, dude.
What does aggro mean? You're the WoW player.
Like aggression.
2Gs for aggression.
Oh, okay. Shit. Well, yeah, people might spell it wrong. Well, there's Agrobank. All right. Anyway, to be continued. We'll come back to that. Demeter was one of the funniest names we ever came up with. Check Demeter.
Oh, you gotta check Demeter. It's still
to me. That's half the fun to me. If it wasn't such like a volatile space, I'd love to be in branding, just thinking up domains all day, every day.
So actually, I was thinking, does brand, does that exist? Is that illegal to brand? The word brand?
Can you brand? What do you mean, like trademark the word brand?
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if it hasn't been done.
There's no way it hasn't been taken.
Like brand.io or something.
It's just saying like the old XKCD brand milk, and it's just a white carton of milk with the word milk on it.
Dictionary. What, dude? Yeah, no, I
don't
know.
No way.
I don't know if anybody has brand trademarked. Isn't there some kind of rule with trademarks where you can't trademark certain things that are like too common?
Too high. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fair. Sure. That's fair. Although I was talking about the work we're doing, they're always like, oh, what patents can we apply to some of the work that's being done here? And one of the points they made was that you can patent, you want to patent as high up on the taxonomy as you can. But don't patent tigers, patent cats.
Because it's more broad?
The patent boundary, is as much intellectual property as you can see.
Okay, I see. Have you ever gotten a patent?
I was in a meeting last week about patentable material for the work I'm doing. So we'll see. And then maybe I can talk about it. I'm sketched about talking about it because it's pretty cool.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, so that's a lot of fun. And then also, and maybe even more readily, talking SaaS, I am probably going to buy clean.coffee for $1,000. Turn this thing into a SaaS. I feel like people pay for Easy Retro. Surely they will pay for clean.coffee.
Sure.
Just a little less.
Yeah. That'd be awesome.
And I'll take like a screenshot of what G says, like, wow, this is really good. I'll be like, this, is a real user.
Testimonials, man. All right. Thanks a lot. I'm going to spend the next hour thinking about domains.
Alrighty. Well, thank you for your time, and I'll let you know how it goes. Can you send me actually a picture of the drawing that you took?
Yeah. Yep.
I think that would be fun.
Okay.